What's up, everybody? Paul here from the Hoops Crew, and Christian Petracca is the big name that's popped up in the last 24 hours. He was spotted in Adelaide. It was confirmed that he'd spoken to Dimmer Hardwick on the Gold Coast on a few occasions, and now Melbourne has come out and confirmed that he has expressed his interest in departing the club, which is a step further than where he went last year, where it was all rumbling in the background. There was a bit of noise, but ultimately no action. This year, in 2025, Christian Petracca looks to be on the move. He certainly wants to be on the move anyway. And so, as I just alluded to, there's two clubs that have really emerged as front runners in this conversation. That is the Gold Coast Suns and the Adelaide Crows, with, of course, him having interacted with both of them regarding a potential transaction. Now, our beloved Geelong Football Club has not been linked to Christian Petracca just yet. But there's been a bit of noise. There's been a few people asking the question, will the Cats get involved? Are they interested? And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in this particular video. I'm not saying we will. I'm going to explore how it might be possible. There's lots of different pieces to the puzzle and complicating factors that Geelong would have to work through in order to facilitate something like this in the first place. But we're going to talk a little bit about it, and we'll see whether this is at all possible. We'll do all of that right after this word from our sponsor.
The Hoops Crew Media Network is proudly sponsored by Cyril Cook Florist. Visit them at shop 1211 Leather Street in Breakwater. Phone them on 035 222 2244 or visit their website at www.cyrilcookflorist.com.au and use the offer code GOCATS in the voucher field at checkout to get 20% off your next online purchase.
Thank you, Cyril Cook Florist, as always, for your ongoing support of the Hoops Crew and all we get up to. Now, let's talk a little bit about the news and then the potential transaction that Geelong could potentially try to engage with. So let's begin here by talking about what's actually occurred. Well, trade talk, Melbourne boss confirms Petracca's desired exit. Melbourne star Christian Petracca has commenced his search for a new club, with Demons CEO Paul Guerra confirming the midfielder's desire to leave the club. Petracca landed in Adelaide on Monday, with SEN's Tom Morris reporting that he's completed a medical with the Crows as he weighs up a move away from the Demons. According to Trade Radio's Kel Toomey, Guerra has confirmed Petracca's position, with the club aware that the star is on the verge of a move elsewhere. We met with Christian late last week, where he expressed his desire to explore a fresh start in 2026, Guerra said in a letter to members. Christian is contracted for a further 4 years and is a once-in-a-generation player. With this in mind, any decision regarding Christian's future will be made in the best interests of the Melbourne Football Club. This has been coming for a while now, and it's about where he needs to get, where he wants to get to. Toomey confirmed on Trade Radio. It's happening, and it's about satisfying Melbourne in a deal. The split has to happen. He never met with any clubs last year, even though he wanted out. We alluded to that just before. He's less emotional this year. Gold Coast is best placed to deal with Melbourne. Now, of course, the reason why Gold Coast is best placed to work with Melbourne here is largely due to the fact that they've got an abundance of first rounders. Now, they do have academy picks, but they've got that they're going to need to make a play for, but they do have an abundance of first round picks this year. They've also, and they're pretty decent first round picks this year. They've also got some good, young, talented players who will absolutely be beneficial to the Melbourne Football Club if they went to that team. So they've got plenty to work with. Adelaide, less so, but he's also clearly showing some interest in going there, and I'm sure are more than capable of facilitating a deal. They certainly had no concerns in their pursuits of other players up until this point. Obviously, the Nasiah Wanganeen Miller one was one of the big ones, and they clearly felt like they could transact with the Saints in that particular case. And positionally, I think the two clubs aren't that different. Melbourne's probably on the slide. St Kilda, clearly, with all the players that they're signing on, are about to explode in terms of their on-field success, you would imagine. But in terms of, I guess, where they're at currently, drafts, what's available to them, the two clubs are in fairly similar spaces. So now the question becomes, the Cats, can they get involved? Now, I put together a video 12 months ago, and I wasn't overly confident in the possibility of it working, but I wanted to explore it anyway. And I kind of want to do the same again now. So for any neutrals, if you're a Melbourne supporter, please don't get carried away here. I'm not going to sit here and say, this is happening, and this is why, and why the Cats should be front runners. None of that sort of thing. But I do want to entertain the possibility, because Geelong is obviously on the hunt for gun midfielders. We've made it pretty clear though not publicly, that we're keen on the likes of Sam Walsh, that we're keen on the likes of Zach Butters, etc. And I think Christian Petracca really fits that mold just as much as those other two guys. And so I think if we're just talking about would someone like Christian Petracca be a handy acquisition for the Cats, the answer is definitively yes. The way he works both in the midfield and in the forward line would be of huge benefit to the Cats. And can really support either of those two parts of the ground. Though, of course, he's probably best suited these days to a midfielder who drifts forward, a very attacking midfielder. I'm okay with all of this. But then the question becomes, well, how do we get this done? Now, I've been doing some mucking around, and part of this is obscured by my handle here. But I've got myself a little trade board that I've been kind of building out and fleshing out ideas. And of course, what people can see from this is that Rowan Marshall is kind of the top of that list. And it's become pretty clear that Rowan Marshall's the top priority for the Cats. Whether they get him or not, there are some rumblings that maybe he's starting to settle at St Kilda. Whether we get him or not is a whole other story. But another big name, of course, is Charlie Curnow. Now, let's make sure we're crystal clear. There is no scenario where you can get all three of these guys. It's absolutely, in my mind, impossible for Geelong to make that happen. Across multiple years, possible. You've got, up to 3 years of picks to work with this year, 2025, 26, and 27. If it continues on in next year, then got 26, 27, and 28 to work with. So you've got 4 years of draft picks you can work with if this played out over multiple years, but it's clearly not. So I think you're in a scenario here where you're getting Marshall and Curnow, Marshall and Petracca, Curnow and Petracca, none of the above, one of the above, but not all three. Not all three. Like, I just don't see it as being possible. And as it is, 2 is still going to be really, really difficult because the Cats don't have a huge amount of tradable assets, be it picks or players that they're willing to part with. So what does it look like? Well, I've been kicking around ideas, and if anyone's seen me recently on the Blue Abroad show with Terry, I kind of floated some ideas there that would potentially make a deal for Curnow work. And I honestly feel like the price that you're going to have to pay Melbourne to get Christian Petracca off their books is not going to be that dissimilar to what you're going to have to offer Carlton to get a Charlie Curnow across as well, if you're Geelong. Because you don't have, a pick 4 or 5, something on the ultra high end of the draft. So you're probably going to be looking at mixing first rounders, future first rounders, and players into the mix. And the question becomes, how many first rounders is probably a starting point. And I would imagine any conversation for Christian Petracca probably at least involves 2 first rounders. And then the possibility for more on top of it, because if we're talking about Geelong, they've got pick 17, which is going to push out probably to pick 22 or thereabouts this year. Then you're also, talking about 2026, where there's a high likelihood that Geelong's going to be there or thereabouts again next year. And so you're talking about, again, your picks 15, 16, 17, 18, that sort of ballpark. Once again, pending the picks being pushed back for free agency, father-son, academies, etc. So it's going to be a real challenge for the Cats. It's what the sweetener is in terms of a player that I think is really important for any deal involving both Curnow or Petracca. And a huge piece of that puzzle is the Marshall one. If Geelong can engage with St Kilda and make a deal with St Kilda that doesn't involve their first round pick, and again, a player probably has to get involved there, so Geelong's going to have to give up more than they would probably usually want to give up with in these scenarios to pry some of these players out. But if Geelong can work with St Kilda and offer a second round pick, they probably have to trade one in. And if you can kind of see what I've got here, I've been kicking around the idea of, chasing Essendon's early second round pick, offering some futures, offering 2026 seconds and maybe 2027 second round pick, or even a second and a third from 2026, getting that earlier selection in the second round from Essendon in 2025, offering that to St Kilda, along with a player. And I've kind of floated the idea of someone like Ted Closey, who's being sussed out by other clubs, offering those two combined, and that being fairly equal to then your pick 1, where you're getting a player who's going to be really handy in your midfield. He's clearly got the skills. I don't love the idea of Ted Closey going. I think I rate him quite highly. But someone who's clearly got the skills, who's up to the level and is just lacking an opportunity because he's behind a Max Holmes and a Bailey Smith and and Paddy Dangerfield and Tom Atkins and all those sorts of guys, the Jai Clarks and George Stevenses of the world as well, that are still kind of seemingly ahead of him a little bit in the pecking order as well. James Warple, who's going to come in as a free agent as well. All these guys seem to be ahead of him in the pecking order, but he's going to be a really valuable asset to most clubs. And so I think putting him out there, along with an early second round pick, gets you to something equivalent to your pick 17 pending the slide to appease St Kilda. If you can get that done, and if regardless of what it needs to look like, if you're Geelong and you can protect that first round selection, what is currently pick 17, regardless of what it slides to, if you can protect pick 17, then you can bring it along with combined first round picks from future years to engage in a conversation around Curnow, or specifically to our conversation here around Christian Petracca. And just to be clear, if I got to choose any of the players that Geelong have been linked to at the moment, aside from Marshall, who as a ruckman is blatantly obvious that we need him, but the Curnows, the Sam Walshes, because his name got connected just loosely via trade radio today, Christian Petracca, all those, I would take Christian Petracca hands down. He would be my first selection of those guys any day of the week. If I was the boss and got to make those decisions. So I want to then put together a really juicy deal for Melbourne, offering this year's first, offering next year's first, offering, again, you're probably having to part with another player in here that's going to be valuable to Melbourne to get that deal over the line is what it's going to take. Financially, there's no real problems here. We'll give him a free block of land, and I'm kidding. Charlie Curnow is allegedly, in his scenario, willing to rip up his contract upon getting to the Cats. If that's where he ends up, because that's what he wants, where he wants to be, he's willing to rip up his contract and play for less money. That's been well reported already. And I'd imagine there's probably some willingness from Christian Petracca to go down a similar sort of path. And his contract is very back-ended from all reports, where there's up to even as much as $1.7 million per season on the cards for him over the course of the remaining 4 years of his current contract. Geelong won't want to pay that. But if he can get to a club where he's going to feel like he's a genuine contender, he's going to be happy, he's away from the Melbourne bubble, but he's still in Victoria, so he's close to home, he's close to where he's already settled, this could be quite appealing. And Geelong, I think, has the means to make it happen. They're just going to potentially, to appease St Kilda, and of course, if the St Kilda thing doesn't happen, then we've got more to work with. But to appease St Kilda and then potentially Melbourne, or St Kilda and then Carlton, you're going to have to give up probably 2 players in this to allow for your first rounders to be available. I think offering up 2027 first round selections is not going to be overly interesting to clubs, even if it is a highly rated draft, because Tasmania will come into the mix there, and that's going to steal. Like, you really don't know what you're going to get. It's going to be so heavily compromised. This year is already compromised. 2027, when we get there, is going to be wild. It's going to be Gold Coast and GWS all over again. 2026 reportedly has there's a very good crop of players coming through. And so if you're Carlton, well, you need some picks for a father-son that's coming through. If you're Melbourne, you're looking going, there's some fantastic talent here and we've got more first rounders. Regardless of, whether that's, ends up being a pick 15 versus pick 11, if Geelong was to slide a little bit. This is all appealing for. My understanding is it's a little less compromised next year as well. Let alone the fact that clubs are going to have to offer a lot more beginning in 2026 to get their father sons, to get their academies. There's a chance that when you're pick 15 or 16 or 17 or 18, that you actually might move up the order, because Carlton, to go and get their next big father son next year, might have to offer 2 first round picks to match a bid that comes up, and so you actually move up. So it's not the worst thing in a supposedly very good draft for 2026, where there's some little compromises going to be made where clubs are going to have to pay more than what they've been doing in the past. It's not a bad thing to just have an extra first, and maybe your pick 15 becomes pick 11 or 12 because of some of these other movements. These are some of the things that I'm working through in my mind, and I'd love for you to work through in yours as we have this conversation about Christian Petracca, Charlie Curnow, factoring in Rowan Marshall, and what some of these deals could look like. Melbourne fans, I'd be interested to hear from you if, hypothetically, and again, all of this is hypothetical, his name has not been attached to the Cats in any way, shape, or form so far, and it may never be, but I want to engage in the conversation because I've been asked about it a little bit already. Melbourne fans, if you're watching, if you were forced into a deal with Geelong, what would it take? What would Geelong have to offer you through presumably, because again, we don't have a huge amount of high-end draft picks. What would it take for you to engage in the conversation? How many firsts would you need to do, similar to what I proposed to, with the Rowan Marshall thing, which is take your pick 17 from this year, work with another club to take your pick 17, make it pick 11, toss in your, and sorry, I don't know why I keep coming back to that number, but an earlier first round pick, then your 2026 first rounder. What do some of these things need to look like? I'd love to hear from you. Cats fans, of course, always really interested. Should Christian Petracca be our number one preference? Should it be Charlie Curnow? Rowan Marshall, that's obviously, I think most of us are in sync that Rowan Marshall is our number one priority because of our ruck deficiencies. But setting him aside, how could we make this happen? Would love to hear your thoughts. Do we just pass on both of those two big guys and just focus on Marshall? Keen to hear all of your thoughts. Use that comment section. Like this video if you haven't already. Check out all of the awesome Hoops Crew content. We've got a lot of it from myself, Ben, and the chaps. So please subscribe and check it all out. You'll find us on Patreon as well. That is patreon.com/thehoopscrew, where there's a whole lot of early access, extended, and exclusive content there for you to enjoy from, again, myself, Ben, and the chaps. So please enjoy it. It's a $5 a month subscription, and there's a 7-day free trial to see if it's for you before you buy. You'll find me on socials at Paul James Games. That's on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Instagram. The Hoops Crew you'll find at The Hoops Crew. And until next time, remain Geelong strong, everyone. Would be good to see Christian Petracca in the Hoops. Don't know if it'll happen. I think it's quite unlikely, but I like to get a bit fanciful here. Let me know your thoughts once again, and I will see you later.